Well, as anyone who's worked with me knows, this is probably one of my few all-time favorite quotes. I use it every time I teach, every lesson I write. It's really at the heart of it. When I started teaching leadership a million years ago, I just came across this quote. I don't remember how, I don't remember when or why, but this quote came to me and I've never let it go. When we ran a conference for the entire state of student leaders, this was the very first quote on the very first slide um, that we used to kind of introduce the entire conference. And the thing about quotes is, like, quotes are always great because they make you kind of stop and think in these short bites, like almost like a fortune cookie of truth. And this quote specifically just continues decades later to just gnaw at me. The idea that every piece of this quote has an element of truth, and you put it together, and really it's holding up a mirror to society that we've got something wrong. And because we are such in an objective materialistic society now that we think everything is so tangible and everything is so scientifically objective outside of us, that we forget that there's a way more complicated world on the inside. I mean, I've heard the quote that there are more connections in one person's brain than there are stars in the universe. And again, I don't know if that's just a fun little fake fact or a true fact, but that idea that our brains are way beyond our understanding. It is, we are well into the 2025 here, and we still don't understand how consciousness works. And so we are vastly complicated in our inner world, but we try to oversimplify things in our outer world. So the journey I'm going to take us on today is the truth of this quote is, if we don't see things as they are, we see them as we are, then we better be able to shift the inside. Because if we're looking at a world, if I'm looking at today or this moment as frustrating or as something is wrong, I'm mad at my family, I'm mad at my wife, I'm mad at my work, maybe it has nothing to do with them and has everything to do with me. I have this practice that I do now is, like, when I get really mad at my wife and I know I'm right, the first thing I do is I go sit outside and separate myself from the situation and ask myself, what is she experiencing? What is she experiencing with me? And what is it about me that's creating this situation? And so I look inside to what's happening. And I know this might shock you, but 100% of the time I'm wrong. And so she's going to clip that out to make sure she uses it against me. But no matter, even if I was right in the argument, I'm wrong in how I'm showing up in it, because there's something going on with me on the inside. So today I'm going to walk you through a journey that is an element of story. It's something that I've seen. It's kind of popped up on my journey these last couple of weeks. So I've been thinking about it. I've been playing with this idea. And so when I really kind of hold on to an idea about story, or this idea of inverting story or inverting leadership, what happens is I've got to create it into a teachable lesson. So that's what I'm kind of do for you, is I want to teach you what I'm learning about the ability for us as individuals to invert our story at a moment. Is what is happening, or is what is happening in my world happening to me? And you think, well, that's the same thing. It is not, because there is an event and then there's an experience. And I need to separate those two things, because we all know that two different people can be at the same event and have two different experiences. There are people at the park having a great time, and there are people at the park who are having the worst day of their life. Some people are there to go for a walk and enjoy fresh air and see nature, and some people might be there getting away because they're contemplating, a breakup, or found out somebody was sick. They can be in the same place at the same time, having completely different experiences. And so we need to witness that we could be doing that same thing in our own story. And what I'm going to challenge myself to do is prove that, not just through words or through stories, but also how that shows up in science as well. So to do this, now buckle up, no laughing. We're going to go back to the 80s, because I want to share with you how that kind of mapped to me. And so we're going to go back this must have been about 1982. And this lovely family here is my family. And so I had to be about 10 years old in that picture, which would make my brother here on the far right of the picture This is my brother Paul. He's about 4 years older than me. This is my little brother Jamie. He's about 4 years younger. And this is my mom and my dad. And, what a lovely family. So luckily I came across this picture recently, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to put this up here and see. Look at that hair. Look at that hair. It wasn't always white. So, but look at that tight shirt. That was a fit little kid there. Anyway, growing up in that family, what happens when we're in our family are our first storytellers. And so there's our family, and then there's society. But what I want to focus on here at the beginning of this journey of inverting our story, I want us to focus on like what happens in our family. So as I'm explaining my family, let your brain drift through kind of, and I think it will naturally, like kind of what your family was teaching you as well. And so my family, my mom and dad were immigrants from England. They had a sweet accent. My brother is actually from England. He still is on a green card. He's a British citizen. My parents eventually become American citizen. I was the first person in our entire family born in the United States. Obviously, I don't have a cool accent. I don't even hear the accent. So when people say, can you talk with an accent? I do the worst accent possible. But anyway, when they came over here, they came over like any immigrant. They came over here for the hope of a better life. My mom was a hairdresser, and my dad worked in tool and die, which is like auto line assembly. And so we moved to suburban Detroit. We are a normal, like typical middle class, middle American, Midwest, family of immigrants. There was my mom, my dad, the 3 kids. We had a dog named Sheba, and we were growing up in this nice, like suburban house, the nice suburban yard. And as you can see in this picture, we had the nice suburban picture. But it's funny when I look at this picture, like it doesn't, like there's something missing. Like if you look at the pictures, like there's these smiles, like my dad's got a bit of a smile, my mom's got a bit of a smile, but you can see, like when I look at this, the first thing I thought of is like, we just got yelled at about something. Cause like we are so deadpan. And what I want to talk about in terms of inverting the story is what it was like for me and my brother, specifically me and my oldest brother, because my little brother was pretty small at this point. But because my dad was a line worker and because my mom was a hairdresser, they worked long and odd hours. Many times my dad was working the night shift, which meant he slept during the day. But then depending on how the car economy went, and in the early 80s, the economy was not great. So there was oftentimes he would be laid off or he would take these odd jobs. My mom consistently in the same shop worked for 50 years as a hairdresser, but oftentimes she would have to work kind of that shift from the morning to the evening so that people, when they got off work, could get their hair cut. So me and my brothers were left home a lot. And when my wife saw this picture, she looked at me and she goes, man, you just look like trouble. And we were trouble. We got in a lot of trouble. And so when the parents were away, the kids would play. I mean, we would just tear things up, but we would try to kind of sort things out. Like we'd build ramps out of cardboard. We'd take all the pillows and like make it the Olympics and try to jump over them and nearly break our necks. We jumped off the roof. We just got into all kinds of terror. We're 3 boys, a little bit out of control. But one thing was always consistent. When my dad's car pulled into the driveway, we were terrified. My mom was raised as like the domestic wife. She cooked, she cleaned, she took care of everything. I mean, you didn't have laundry dirty for 10 minutes before my mom had a load going. My dad was raised in the generation of don't spare the rod. That generation was literally taught not to hug their kids, that discipline was necessary in order for especially young men, but women as well, to become adults. And so that was his attitude. We were raised in a very angry and fearful house. My mom was terrified of my dad. He never touched her, but they would fight, but she would just never fight back. So she was always afraid of him. And then we were afraid of him. So when his car pulled into the driveway, I mean, it was like Pavlovian dogs. We would just react. You would get anxious, you would get scared. And I remember one specific day, I only remember me and my brother, my older brother, Paul, being there, but I'm sure my little brother was there. But what we decided to do was this time we were going to prevent his anger. And the way we were going to do that was we were going to clean the heck out of the house. And so we did everything. I mean, my mom was a clean freak. She could white glove clean that house. So we did the same thing. We made sure everything was put away. The TV was off. We had our homework done. The floors were clean. The outside of the fridge, the countertops, the dishes were put away. Everything was done. And we thought, if we're good, then maybe he would come in and not be angry. Being kids, we don't realize that our parents have a world outside of our world. And whatever he was going through, the stress of his job, the stress of being unemployed and laid off, the stress of like the finances. I remember my dad telling me later on in life that there were periods during this time where he thought he would have to steal food for us to eat. And we never knew that because we never went without. And so you don't notice what you're missing, you just notice what you have. And so my dad comes in on this day, and me and my brother are just sitting there kind of like watching and waiting, like he's going to come in and see what a good job we did. He's going to be proud of us and everything's going to be great. It's going to be a good night. And he came in, and Sheba, our dog, which was like, she was really hyper, she'd jump around a lot. And so she got all excited that he came home. And when he came in, she jumped up on him. Like she jumped up and put her paws on him. And immediately he struck her. And then he opened up the basement stairs and chucked her down the stairs. And she just skidded along the stairs. She was okay. But as a kid, like just seeing that, it just stuck in me because we worked so hard for that to be a good moment. And as soon as he came in, he snapped. And I remember being paralyzed, just absolutely terrified of what we just experienced because we were predicting and expecting one thing, and violence like came in and was terrifying. And so that's just sat with me a long time is like this world. And so I want to put that story to the side for a minute because I need us to think like we've all grown up in situations like this. Nobody grows up in a perfect family. And even if they do, it doesn't happen without pain. Like there are things that are going to happen. There is nobody who grows up 0 to 18 and escapes suffering. You could have the world's perfect parents, but suffering is going to be part of the equation. And so when we look at this, like this is something that we've learned about in seen and uncovered in this process of story. So we're going to talk about inverting story. And the language that we use in story of self is like shifting that pain, that fear and that anger that I was raised with, and shifting it towards purpose. Because in this element, this kid is developing a story about himself. Because when he sees that, I can be someone my father can be happy about or proud of. And then he shows up and he's violent. That kid can only experience that through his own lens. He's not experiencing the world as it is. He's experiencing it as he is. And so what's happening is he's believing something is wrong with him. My brother does the same thing, but he's going to have it happen his own way. And so the question becomes is like, what is the story that this kid is writing? What does he do with that fear and that anger? Because that's a very, very dangerous combination of emotions. And so what we see in story often is almost every time is in the hundreds and thousands of people we've worked with, what we're finding is that these old stories, they lay dormant. They lay deep within our brain, but they write the scripts above the brain. So that what's happening deep in us, this pain, it's directing the way we're experiencing the world. Remember, we don't see the world as it is, we see it as we are. So when we've experienced these pain moments, they've already written themselves, imprinted themselves in our brain so that when we're interacting with the world, we think the problem is with the world. Like even by inverting the position of that last story, if we go back to this picture and I put myself in my dad's shoes, I invert it from what I experienced to what he experienced. One, I can't possibly understand what he was going through. Maybe that was one of those days he realized he wasn't going to be able to pay the mortgage or get his food. I don't know. And so what he was possibly thinking about when he was driving home, what he was possibly thinking about when he walked in the house, you know, all of that pain that he had discharged in anger and in physical rage. And we can sit here and judge and be like, that was so wrong, but we don't know what he was going through and what he's been through in his whole life story. And so when I invert that, I think, what kind of pain must a father be in that he couldn't see the good in his own children? So I didn't realize that when I was 10. I didn't realize that when I was 20 or even 30. It was probably in my 30s that I really began to sit down and understand my father as his own man and not only as my father. And it gave me the space to be able to step back and be like, yeah, this adulting thing is really hard. So what we're doing in story and what we're going to do today is we're going to practice that shifting of pain to purpose. And I want you to play along with me, because we're going to look at pain and then we're going to practice shifting it to purpose and see what that looks like. But even before we get there, what I want to prove to you is that your brain is already doing this for you. Like, this is something that will blow people away. Because what is happening here is the idea that what we think is happening in our brain is what's happening all throughout our brain. Now, what I mean by that is most of the brain that we are interacting with as human beings is our cognitive part, mostly our prefrontal cortex. It's like the brakes of the brain. You know, like kids want to jump off roof and, you know, drink copious amounts of alcohol, or, you know, they drive really fast, they do reckless behavior, and we're like, these kids. But what it really is their prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed until they're, you know, mid-late 20s. And so that's their brake. So it's like me handing you the keys to the car and saying, the more you drive it, the better your brakes are going to work. Well, guess what's going to happen the first few years you're driving that thing? It's going to be bad. And hopefully you make it through that, you know, before your brakes start to develop. But the brain does that. And as we get older, we often go to cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, and they go in and they tinker with that part of our engine, right? They're tinkering with our prefrontal cortex, and they're dealing with our cognitive brain. But the question I have in story is what if the problem is deeper than that? Now, I know in cognitive behavioral therapy, they'll go through your past and, you know, the relation, you know, Freudian, let's talk about your mother and your father and things like that. But there's a map underneath that connects all of those events, because it's not the events that shape us, it's the experience of the events. So I could tell you that story about my dad, and if my brother told that story, even if he remembers it, that's assuming that he might not remember that story at all, because it might not have been as defining to him or measurable to him or meaningful to him. And my little brother for sure wouldn't remember that. Like I said, I don't even remember him being there, but he had to be somewhere. But the point being is like, we all experience different events differently. So what's happening in our brain is that when we feel this fear, so that kid, when his dad comes home, it triggers a sequence of events. And what happens is that fear response comes in. Our brain receives fear, not in the cognitive realm. You know, that's like where therapy's at. It's operating all the way deep within the center of our brain, this part right above the roof of our mouth called the hypothalamus. And what happens is that is connected right here by the amygdala and the hippocampus. And what we have to understand is like when we have a deeply emotional experience, like my dad chucking my dog, the brain then triggers that and it magnifies it. So it takes what is dangerous and then it says, this could be deadly. So it goes from fear to terror. And what happens is your brain is looking for the deepest part of a threat response. Your brain is specifically wired to detect threats, to detect the negative in the world. I need you to listen to me on that very carefully. Your brain is wired to detect the negative in the world. So you think you're receiving any story. You just, well, like, no, this is just how it happened. No. Your brain will take any event and turn it actually towards the negative, because it's looking for what is wrong with the situation. So you might have a simple conversation with your significant other, and the thing is, at the end of it, they're just telling you about their day, and at the end of it, you feel attacked, or you feel alone, or you feel angry. You're like, well, that's not what you said. And you're like, and he or she, they're like, well, that's what I was trying to say, but I heard this differently. And all of a sudden, you're fighting over, you know, he picked up noodles at the store or something. And you're like, well, how does that happen? Because our brain takes normal events and data, and it will filter that to see something wrong with it. It's what it's attempted to do. Now, that doesn't give you an excuse to do that, because you need to know it does it so that you can invert that. So when we look at this, when our brain detects any type of fear, it magnifies it. It determines other possible threats. So it takes a threat and then it surrounds it with other threats. It sees other negative things. And I'm going to prove that to you in a second. And then what it does is it hands that off to the amygdala, or that is the amygdala. The amygdala is like, oh my God, there's these other threats. We better remember this. What was that first domino? So remember back when I started the story about my dad, where did the fear start? When he drove into the driveway. That was the first domino, and it triggered the sequence. So we tried to buffer that by doing good, but what happened was he still came in and he still raged. And so our brain is like, we will never be safe, or my brain would be. I am never going to be safe. Holy crap. So our brain is wired for this. Now, let's play that experiment back, but to you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share a very, very simple story, just a very simple story. And I want you to watch what your brain does with this story. Now, this is just two different stories about kind of the same topic. And you'll see that in a second. But what I want you to understand is that when they did this experiment with people, they just shared this story and they asked the data, they would share the two stories randomly with people. So they didn't get both stories. So you're going to get a little bit of a cheat code here because you're going to get both stories. But they would share a story with one person and then they'd share the other person and they would ask them about the main character. So let me share you this story. Story one. The vice president of a company went to the chairman of the board and said, "We are thinking about starting a new program. It will help us increase profits, but it's also going to hurt the environment." The chairman of the board answered, "I don't care at all about harming the environment. I just want to make as much profit as I can. Let's start the new program." They started the new program, and sure enough, the environment was harmed. So the question that is asked after that is this: did the chairman choose to harm the environment? And so we look at this again and we're like, right, there's a condition. We are thinking of starting a new program. It will increase profits, but it will harm the environment. The chairman answered, "I don't care about the environment. I just want to make as much profit as I can, start the new program." And so they will ask people, did the chairman make a choice to harm the program? Now, in a couple slides, I'm going to ruin it because I'm going to tell you 82%, I think it was over 82%, but 82% of people believe that he made that choice, or she, being sexist here. But they believe that the chairman of the board made a decision knowing that it would harm the environment. So therefore, that was the intention. He chose to harm the environment. Now, what they did is they gave a second story to different people. So let's look at this one. Different story. The vice president of the company went to the chairman of the board and said, "We are thinking of starting a new program. It will help us increase profits. It will also help the environment." The chairman of the board says, "I don't care about helping the environment. I just want to make as much profit as I can. Let's start the new program." They started the new program. Sure enough, the environment was helped. And so they asked the same question. Is the chairman of the board responsible for choosing to help the environment? Now, on this one, 77% of people said that he did not. Now, these two stories, if you think about them, they're brain breaking because he says the exact same thing in both circumstances. But when it has a negative result, we hold the chairman accountable because 80+% of people are like, "Hey, he made this decision knowing that it would hurt the environment. He didn't care about the environment, but he made a decision making that the negative result makes him accountable for it." See that? Your brain attaches the negative result to the person who made the choice. That makes perfect sense. Now, notice the second story. Again, you see both stories, so you have a little bit of a shift here, but this is the data on this. Almost 80% of the people, so almost the exact same percentage, says the chairman in the second story, who says the exact same thing, is not seen as choosing the good. So he's accountable for choosing the bad, but he's not accountable for choosing the good. And the thing is in our brain, that makes perfect sense. Well, he didn't want to do good. Well, he didn't care. No. He said he didn't care about the good, but he also said he didn't care the bad. So if you do something and bad happens, you've chosen that. And if you do something and good happens, that was a fluke. And the funny thing about this is called the Knobe Effect. This is the philosopher who found this. Our brain is doing that on purpose. If we go back to the brain, it's trained to do that, which means when we're doing that for ourselves, if you have a negative thought about yourself, if this kid right here has a negative thought about himself, his brain's like, "That's true." It's a confirmation bias. It's going to see the bad. "Oh, I cleaned and my dad was still angry. That's my fault." Our brains are 80% more likely to accept a negative truth than a positive. That kid didn't go, "Hey, I did good and my dad's just a psycho." That kid didn't have that capability, and neither do you or I. Every day when we wake up, our brain is 80% more likely to see the negative in the world, in our world, than it is the good. And that is true internally as well, because it's coming from an inner place. We see things as we are. And we're 80% less likely to see the good. So when we talk about story and we're shifting from pain to purpose, one of the first things we have to do is learn to see what is the source of the bad and is it true? Because in both of these stories, the chairman says, I don't care. But yet we're attributing it. Our brain is saying the negative is their fault, but the good isn't. And so this applies back to ourselves. You know, gotta talk about Ford, Ford Motor Company, Ford Field, Detroit Lions. Somehow got to get that in every time. But here we go. And listen, there's a lot wrong with Henry Ford, public education. Pretty sure he was a Nazi. I don't know. There's a lot going on with Ford. But the quote is good. And so what we'll look at here is whether you think you can or you can't, either way, you're right. And that is a powerful statement. And we've seen this in people we care about, where they go in not believing something, right? They manifest their destiny because I can't do this, and so they don't. It isn't until you prove that you can, until you can run further than a mile, that you can do more than one push-up, that you cannot eat ice cream for an entire day, that you actually prove the negative false. Remember, we have a negativity bias. And so what we have to do is we have to understand if we're 80% negative, we have to find that 20% way around that rule and prove that wrong. And so what we've got to do with story is look at what is our way we invert that. But going all the way back to the first slide, the problem is within us. So we have to look at the story that we have within. So we're going to do this together. If you're so bold, and Haley, I already know you did it and you're driving, so you can't do it anyway. So number one, we have to name our pain. And what I mean by that is when we have a story, there's two things that are happening. There's the story that is happening and the belief about ourselves that occurs there. I was talking to a friend of mine. They're running a business and they're dealing with people and they're like, yeah, you know, they just really won't sign up and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, why? And he's like, oh, they just really don't believe that they can grow their business. I said, that's not true. That's not true. Right? I don't believe I can grow my business. That is an external event. So the question I would ask is, what is the belief about themselves? I don't think I am capable of growing this, that I'm not good enough, that I'm not smart enough, I'm not strong enough, I don't have enough energy, or I don't have enough time. But it's an I statement, that they believe something negative about themselves, so it manifests as their inability to do this. So when we talk about pain, pain is caused because of a belief. If someone looks at me and goes, wow, you're really tall. One, that's not true. I'm only 5'9", and probably shrinking. So the thing is like, if someone is going to come at me and make fun of me, one, I like, is being tall a bad thing? And then the second thing is that's not even true. Now, if they're like, hey, your ears kind of stick out, like, well, one, my ears do kind of stick out. Now you're all looking at my ears. And the thing is like, if I'm sensitive to that, then like, especially when I was young, like that would bother me. And so when somebody makes fun of us, it only causes pain if we believe it's true about ourselves. So I want you to think about an event that happened this week, something that upset you, something that made you mad, something that caused you to act out in a way you wouldn't want to normally whack out or act out. And so, and what we're going to do is we're going to name that pain. So I gave examples here, like my story itself is I am invisible, but it can be I am weak, I am not enough, I don't belong, I can't do this, I feel alone, or I am alone. Because remember, I feel still tries to dissociate. So you really want to say I am. I don't know, which pretty means if you say I don't know, really what happens when you say I don't know is what you're saying is I am dumb. Or I can't figure this out. I am incapable. Remember, at the root of every negativity is an accepting identity. If I say you've got pink teeth and you don't have pink teeth, it's not going to offend you. So the thing is when we feel pain, it's because we accepted it. We've accepted something is wrong with us. And so what's a story that your pain is telling you? And so I'm gonna practice this right now because I haven't done this one. Oops, that's not the one we're doing. And what we're going to do is I'm going to list about 6-7 things that go with this. So I have a moment this week where I got very frustrated with my world, with myself. probably with others, but I know I got into a deep frustration point, and the story that I had told myself in that moment was, I can't do this. And so here are all the things that come along with that. When I believe that, here are all the beliefs that came with this. I am not capable. I am not smart enough. I am alone. I am misunderstood. I am a fraud. Remember that. I am going to fail. I am afraid, which really is, I am a coward. So there's some, those suck. Those suck to say out loud. I'm actually going to cheat, and I'm going to jump ahead to this page and steal this. Look at me using technology. Haley would be proud of me. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to slide this right next to it. And so this is a story. And by the way, this is all true. And so what I've done is I'm going to take the story my brain is telling me. It's going to take a frustration at something that I wasn't able to move and that I feel like I was hitting a wall with. And the frustration mounts. I know this will shock you, but I inherited my anger from my father. So I got angry. And based on my man Curtis's inspiration, I decided to go for a run and listen to music and let my brain just work through it. So one, I needed to burn the energy. I had to release that anger. But then what I had to do is keep asking myself is this really true? Because in this moment, what I can tell you is this. In this moment, this was true. That is truly how I felt. That is truly how I saw the world. But if that first slide is true, we don't see things as they are, we see them as we are. Like, I'm also creating that truth. So if you were courageous enough to write that list, which I'm going to guess many of you did not, because you don't want to look at that identity in you that is struggling. Because why would I want to go back to a place of pain? But the problem is, if you don't go back and shift that pain, it keeps coming back. So if I believe this when I hit the wall last time, what's going to happen when I hit the wall tomorrow? Because I'm going to hit the wall tomorrow, or I'm going to hit it on Sunday or next week. The wall is coming again. I am going to get frustrated again. And I'm going to keep responding the same way with the same story, because this is the story I know. So when we look at this, we have to understand, we have to be able to invert the story. So what we do is we make a list of the negative. You know why? Because we have a negativity bias. It's easy. It's 80% easier for me to see all the negative thoughts I have about myself when I'm saying I can't do this. I can't do this because I'm not capable, I'm not smart enough, I'm alone, I'm misunderstood, I'm a fraud, I'm going to fail, I'm afraid, I'm a coward. Those are the words that that guy believes in that moment. And those are frustrating because he doesn't want it to be true, but it's all right there, right in front of him, because that's the world that he's seeing. But the cool thing about inverting a story just flips the narrative. If I can't do this, what does someone look like who can do it? Now, remember, look at how I'm separating that a little bit. If the person who can't do it believes all those things, they're incapable, they're alone, and they're going to fail, what does a person who can do this looks like? I am not capable. I am willing to learn and grow. I'm willing to grow, because on the next, I'm willing to grow. As a matter of fact, I want to grow. I don't want to stay safe. I want to grow. Higher value. I shifted it. I'm not smart enough. I've solved harder problems. I am alone. I have a team, and I know smart people. I am misunderstood. That's a tough one, because now I'm projecting it outward that I'm misunderstood. I need to take time to think this through. Because maybe I am misunderstood because I don't understand what the problem is with me. I'm a fraud. I am a beginner in this adventure. The truth is I'm not at the level of success. I'm not capable of doing the things that someone with way more experience than me can do. It's okay. Right? Like I'm at the beginning of the journey. There was a time in their life where they didn't know either. I'm going to fail. Yes. But I am going to keep moving forward. Yeah, I'm going to fail. And instead of fearing the failure, I've accepted it. I'm bringing it into my own world. I'm afraid. I'm a coward. I'm choosing courage. And I know that this is true because I didn't let that stop me. I didn't let that hold me back. And so when I look at these, remember, negativity versus positive, this is way harder for me to believe. But it has to be true because I've overcome this. Not only this week, but in the past. I've gone through way harder things than not being able to figure out a piece of technology or a pricing plan or how to reach out to people. I've dealt with way harder things in my life. So like, why is this small thing triggering this massive narrative that is pushing me down? So what I do is I invert the story. The negative is easy for me to see. I write it down and then I just look across. I'm all alone. Is that true? No. I have an army of people ready to run. Okay. Right. And so when we're looking at this, we're flipping the script and we're moving the pain into the purpose, because the pain is telling me one thing, but the ability is doing this. And if you can do this, let's say you're a single mom raising a kid all by yourself at home and you're like, I'm all alone and I have no friends and I can't do this. And then you make that list of all the anger and the pain that you're feeling at home all by yourself. And you say, okay, man, that's how I feel right now. That is true. Okay. But what is also true? And just write that down, flip it to the opposite, and tell me that that's not true too. Isn't it true that I'm willing to grow? Yes. Is it true that I've solved harder problems? That is true. That I have a team? That is true. I need to take time and think things through. That's why I went for a run. I'm a beginner. Yeah. Like, this is exciting. Like, yeah, I'm going to hit this. And guess what? I'm probably going to hit harder things. I better be willing to learn to take a hit. The failure is going to be part of the process. Yeah, I tell everyone that. I've got to learn to accept that so that I can keep that story going. So both of these things can be true. So what's the difference? The difference is how we show up in it. Your story is going to be your choice. And I would really strongly suggest that you practice writing these things down. When you get in the defeat about what you can't do, write right next to it the exact opposite. Invert the story, write it right next to it. I'm stupid, I'm alone, I can't figure this out, nobody cares about me, blah, blah, blah. Okay, now write the opposite. People do care about me. I have learned, I am capable. Then you write those things, and what happens is now you have a choice. And so it's a challenge because you don't know exactly what's going to happen. But like this says, you're at this crossroads of deciding which way you're going to go. Are you going to continue to see the world through the negativity bias? You're going to create that world then, because now you're going to manifest that truth. So when I look back at this, which truth do I want to live today? Do I want to live in my negative bias in the 80%, the Knobe Effect, and keep on seeing everything that's wrong with the world? Or do I want to flip that to the positive and see the potential and the good that's in the world? That's my story. And it is my choice. And like I said, the Knobe Effect of like negativity bias versus rejecting the positivity bias, it's a choice. We can choose to see the world in that spec, but we've got to give ourselves the language for it. It gets better. Because the thing that unites that is only a story. It's a story that we're telling ourselves. I'm incapable or I'm capable. It's a story. And so every day in small moments, I get to choose the story I'm living today. I'm fighting my wife. She's 100% wrong. I go sit outside and be like, is this the husband I want to be? I just shift the story from the victim with my wife to the hero who's like, I can create the space that I want. There were times in my life, I was a coach. Well, Yeah. I'll share. I got another story I'm going to share in a second, so I'm going to set that story for another time. It's a good story, but we'll come back to it. But I want you to see like how this works in your brain. So we've already talked about the brain and how it's wired, and how it's wired is toward negativity, but we can shift that story. So just like how do you change a story? We just change the words. If we go back to what's happening here, all we did is flip the words. That's it. Now that seems very simple, but here's what happens in the brain when we flip the words. This right here. This is called neuroplasticity. Now plasticity means something can bend. And so if we look at this, it looks kind of like a weird Y. So if we look at this, this is the way, let's say your brain is already set up. So like with me, fear and anger was part of my pathway. By the way, as I grew up, fear and anger were two of my tools that I dealt with my own pain, because that's what my father taught me. Here's how you deal with pain. You fear others and you bring anger to resolve it. Okay, well, that was very this. I wasn't a violent person because I was too big of a wuss. But what it's saying is as we begin to encounter and do new things, think new thoughts, write down new ideas, what happens is our brain connects, but it's a weak connection. Like this is a super highway right here. But like, notice it's starting to form new connections and new paths. And this is happening all the time. Neuroplasticity occurs throughout your whole life. This isn't something that stops at 28. If it wasn't possible, you couldn't learn to do new things. And so when we look at this, the more and more we think these things, certain roads will thicken. See how that thickens there? And then this one begins to thin. So as we think new thoughts and do new things, don't look at that kid. What happens is it begins to strengthen and remap. And so what happens is that neuron and stuff is there, but that connection is super weak. You know, the mind has created this new rhythm and this new narrative so that what you're experiencing now is different from it is. Of course, you know this because who you are today versus who you were even 5 years ago is completely different. Well, how? You're the same you. Because your brain has wired in itself, and what it believed and knew is true back then is not what it believes and knows here. And that physically is transformative in your brain. Again, some of those old thoughts are there. Some of that fear is still in me. Some of that anger is still in me. It's still there. It's just a much weaker connection. And I know when that connection starts to rise, oh, I got to go sit outside or go for a run. And I've got to shift my position so that that part of my brain doesn't automatically fire. And that's what we do when we invert our story. We take the brain and its negativity bias and we slow it down and we give it a new thing to think about. You have got to decide the story that you're going to tell yourself today. That is just bottom line true. And you've got to remap that and grow that so that your brain has a chance. I can't just today be like, wow, I'm a good person. We cleaned that house one time. Boy, that's going to completely change my day. No. A habit doesn't change just because you stop today. Let's say I'm addicted to my phone because it's always right here. Let's say I don't want to be around my phone. One of the things that I do when I'm working is I put my phone on a table that I would have to stand up and walk to get. So if somebody calls, I have to stand up and go get it, just like back in the olden days when they used to be on the wall. But what will happen is as I'm sitting there and I think about something, my hand will instinctively go reach for it. But if I keep doing it, what is happening is my hand knows that if the phone rings or if I need it, I need to get up and go. So my brain is starting to recognize that I have to move to get my phone instead of just reach out my hand. Neuroplasticity, my patterns of behavior are starting to change. Now, this picture, the kid in a room with this, I'm gonna end with this story, or I'm gonna kind of bring it full circle. I hated high school. There's a lot of reasons for that. It goes back to my hidden value. But when I was in class, like I felt completely alone. I didn't try to make friends because I believed it. I believed I was alone. So I didn't try to make friends with anyone else. I would sit in whatever they were doing. Now, I got this picture of a kid at the front playing with his pencil, but I remember in this class, it was, what's his name? Mr. Baugh. Mr. Baugh's small business management class. And we had it at the beginning of the day, and he was the most like basic teacher, you know, write stuff on the chalkboard, lecture the whole hour, give you a test out of the book, standard activities. And so first hour, I think it was our junior or senior year, like most of the kids in that class would just sleep. Now, I'm a little bit hyper. So once I'm up. So I'm not sleeping. So I remembered as all the other kids would sleep, I would sit there and I would just fiddle, you know, because I'm ADD, I would be fiddling with my pencil. But there was another kid. His name was Mark. And Mark sat 2 rows over and all the way at the front. And he sat in the front row. And he was kind of hyper as I dropped my pen. And he wouldn't sleep either. But what he would do is he would sit and he would do this thing where he flipped his pen. Let's see if I can get a pencil. All right, here's a pencil. Okay. not pencil. So I would watch him, and he would just do this thing where his pencil would flip in his hands. So he would just flip his pencil. And I remember sitting there, I'm like, I'm not getting a lot out of this class. Now I was listening, but ADD, right? I can absorb and do this, but I'd watch him, and every day I tried to flip the pencil. Every day I would look at Mark, and I'd be like, oh my God, how does he do that thing with his pencil? He just flips it. And so every day during that business class, I would do that. So you ready for this? You ready? Here's what I learned. That's what I learned. Small business management class, I think it was junior year. I learned how to spin my pencil around my thumb. Now, when I started, the pencil would shoot everywhere. So there's Mr. Ball or whatever. It wasn't Mr. Ball, something like that. But I think he was my biology teacher. It would shoot everywhere. But the thing is like over time, over the semester, this is what I learned. I learned how to do this. I couldn't do it in the beginning, but practice and practice. And Mark and I ended up becoming friends over that. We ended up working together. We were friends for a real long time. Great guy, engineer now, super smart. But the thing was, like, it's a simple thing. But if I can learn how to spin a pencil with my thumb, the truth is our brain can do that with anything. It might take longer for some of us than others, but our brain has the ability to build and create new pathways for us to experience and learn new skills, but also new thoughts. Because if that's true, if I can learn to spin a pencil on my thumb, can I learn to tell myself a new story? So this kid who went to high school, hated high school, graduates with no friends, doesn't go back to the reunions, really, no contact. I can't remember the last time I talked to anyone from my high school that I graduated with. Ends up becoming a high school teacher. Like, that's what I mean by inverting the story. I was a kid who hated everything about high school and then became a teacher who advocated for every kid in high school. Now, the reason why I'm teaching this story, I'm gonna pull back the whole facade and be very genuine, is because this is the lesson that God keeps teaching me. Now, you call God whatever you want, but my version, my higher power, the universe, whatever. But this is what keeps on being taught to me. Do the stuff you never thought you could. Do the things you never thought you believed you could. Because we have put so many barriers between ourselves and who we're able to become. That's fear. That's identity. I'm not enough. I'm a coward. I'm no good. We put all these things so that we never have to try. The funny thing is when we work with people's stories, the hard stuff in their life, the pain and the tragedy that they've been through, they know that stuff. It's intimately in them, along with the negative bias that creates the hidden value. But also in them is that spark of goodness. And they see it and they feel it. But getting them to go towards that is the hardest thing of story. I tell people story gets harder and harder. They think it gets, when you do your story yourself, they think it gets harder and harder because we go deeper and deeper, all the way to despair. But despair, we know despair. But what we struggle with, what we really have a hard time with is hope. And the belief that we could be good and that we could become something more. That is way harder. That's why we got to do simple activities like, well, write down your belief about yourself. Well, the negative belief is easy. Good. Now all you got to do is just flip it. Just flip that for me and tell me what that list says. Do you believe that? And what will happen is you'll pull away from the good. You'll pull away from that. We just watched people tell their stories. 5 people did their whole story self this last weekend. And I can see it. Man, the fall, the negativity, they get it. They get the pain in their life. But what they wrestle with is the good. They wrestle with the good. And so we have to practice intentionally flipping our stories. We don't see the world as it is. We see it as we are. Well, then we better learn to see the good in ourselves if we want to belong and be in a good world. And so when I hated high school and I became a high school teacher, I hated student council and popular kids. And then I became the leadership class instructor. Like, what? I quit soccer at Rochester Adams, the high school I went to. I quit it because I hated soccer and I hated high school soccer and I hated all the stuff that had to go along with varsity soccer. And then I became the varsity soccer coach at Rochester Adams. Yeah, God's got a sixth sense of humor. And so the things that I always disbelieved about myself, the things that I thought were true, life has this amazing way of redeeming those. And teaching was the best decision I ever made in terms of career. I mean, it keeps on getting better. But if I didn't become a teacher, I wouldn't be sitting here today. I wouldn't have been able to do and experience the things I had. But because that place caused me pain and I was willing to go into that pain, I was able to do things I was never able to do before, experience new things, and realize high school didn't cause me the pain, I did. And so now that we can do better. And coaching soccer, one of the greatest experiences of my life. In my previous life, my previous world back in Michigan, the thing that I miss most about my life was coaching soccer. I just loved that job. And now I'm rebuilding that with this. I swore up and down, you could ask people who know me, I would never run a business. And now I've stepped away from what was safe to do what was really hard. And of course, I'm incapable. But the thing is, if we want to be the best versions of ourselves, we must continue to prove the lies wrong, to prove that 80% of our brain that seeks the negative about ourselves or believes the negatives, that the belief and the reality are not always the same thing. Just like an event is not an experience, the fact that we believe that we're incapable, the fact that we believe that we're unloved, the fact that we believe we're unworthy, it's a lie. But until we start to remap our brains to get to that center, that core part of our brain, and remove that first domino, later in life, me and my dad, and my brothers as well, we all kind of redeemed that story. We became very close. He wasn't a perfect man. I wasn't a perfect son. But the thing was, it didn't matter because we understood that about each other. I remember my dad, I was driving him to the airport. He moved up when the car economy came back. He got to move up with the car companies as well, which was great for him. And I was driving him to an airport. He was flying to Europe to solve this big problem for stamping and all this stuff over there. And on the way, we're just BSing about life and everything like that. And just as we were pulling into the airport, he goes, I really regret the way I raised you. And I told him, Dad, I'm good. I'm good. And that was it. That was it. We both done the work that we needed to do to get to the point to fix the story. But I didn't need to fix his story. I didn't need him to be better. I needed me to be better. And so as we're going forward, like this is the challenge that we have to do every day. You have to shift your pain to purpose. Going back to like what we're trying to do in story, you got to shift your pain to purpose. If you need a reminder, just go to our website. That will tell you that. And you got to rewrite the story every day. And you've got to practice this. Even for the people who've done their story yourself, that's only the beginning of the journey. Because as we go, if we do not create a new map, we will always go back to the old map. And I say that all the time, but understand that's as true about life, finding the way to get to your destination as it is with your brain. You have to remap your brain, y'all. You have to rewrite the story. You have to rewrite the beliefs each and every day because the world isn't going to get better for you. It's just not. Because why would it? It's going to get harder. It's going to get tougher. And we're going to get older. Look at me. But what we can do is change the way we approach the world, the way we approach our story and our version of it. But you got to begin it by reimagining and inverting your identity. Flip who you think you are into who you can be and practice that every day. Practice it every day. That's your homework. That's how we're going to do it. I found this quote and I threw this in quickly at the end because, Brene Brown, she's the girl. She is badass. You either walk inside your story and own it, or you stand outside of your story and hustle for your worthiness. See how it's two different things? You walk inside your story and you own it. Own your story. Or you stand outside your story and you're going to look for the world to make you feel valued. You can't do that. It's never, ever, ever going to work. Invert your story. That's what you need to do. That's your homework. Practice it today. That's it.